First.
Lydia's talking first.
Yeah, so it'll capture your voice. So it's recording now. Are you talking first?
Yeah.
Okay. Just hand it to the next person when you put it around your neck.
How do you click it?
It's not a killer, it's just like you're gonna have no idea.
That's your voice.
Oh, okay. I was like, why am I clicking it?
You got it. We don't stay so far.
What?
Good man.
She'll tell you when.
Oh, yeah. I'm like, you ready?
Oh yeah.
Okay. All right, we're group 6, and our innovation is getting students to eat in the school cafeteria. I'm Lydia.
I'm Steven. Corey. I'm Ryan.
Okay, so how people will learn about this innovation, it's kind of just something that you know going into school. It's just kind of taught into you. So you can learn it by seeing others do it, such as you see your parents do it, other students do it, teachers, and you see it a lot on social media and television. Like, how many movies have you watched and you've seen people eating in the cafeteria and things like that. The cue to action, we decided that there was a cue to action, and that was back in the day when they started eating in cafeterias. It was very difficult for children who lived far away from school to be able to get home for lunch to eat, so they had the problem of malnutrition, and also there were a lot of safety hazards of kids having to go home by themselves without any other people going home with them. The relative advantages, there's not a lot of traffic due to people eating in school during the lunch hours, not having kids come back from lunch parties, so they're going to be to class on time if they have to eat in the cafeteria. Also things like saving money and having them eat in school cafeterias, and they can control nutritional standards if they eat in a cafeteria. If they're not eating in the cafeteria, you don't know where they're eating, what they're eating, or even if they're eating. So observability, it is very observable because you can just see other schools doing it, you can mock other schools, and then if, they like that idea, you could try it for a year and things like that. So there are different systems that you can implement in school cafeterias, so that's the trialability. That first website is MealSite, so for that one, it's different because you can order your meals ahead of time, so it's kind of a website where you have different options, you can order it and the school knows exactly what people ordered and who ordered it. And then for the second website, it's a little bit different. It's more of like you have different options. So there's a salad bar option, a soup option, things like that. So for that one, it's more just they give the kids options. So those are some things based on trialability.
How close does this thing have to be to you?
I'm sorry?
How close does this have to be to you? Or just kind of over here?
You don't have to do this.
Oh.
It should
All right, so what's the complexity? The way we looked at it is it's not real complex. Most schools already have their cafeterias built in. They just need to utilize the students eating in there. They simply walk through the line, get the food they desire, and go sit down and eat their lunch. So then to move on to compatibility, it's relatively compatible. Obviously, lunchrooms have been part of the school system for years. So it's ease of access, it's low cost to students, and there's no need to leave the school for lunch. Where is it on the S-curve? I thought it was kind of in the late majority, and we discussed that through our little group message thing. It varies upon location as well. Most schools are actually requiring students to stay on school grounds to eat lunch now, obviously depending where you're at, like location, state, area, whatever. And then it's also dependent upon how many students pack their lunch too. So the innovators are the rural schools. So this goes back to about the 1930s, I believe. They were using local surplus crops and meat to actually feed the children during school when people obviously didn't have the money to. And then moving on to who the early adopters were. So I thought the early adopters is when the government actually incorporated it in the National School Lunch Program in 1946. So many more rural communities and then also urban areas began to follow. Like I said, adopted by the government following World War II to continue in assisting crop surpluses, and then it was used to promote child nutrition while aiding in using the U.S. supplies.
So the early majority we identified as suburban schools. The reason why we identified as that because they have kind of the constricted area problem. So when you have 2,000 plus kids getting out of lunch, lines get like that, and it's just a little bit too much, and there's not a whole lot of options around those areas. So the problem's pretty intense there. So yeah, the traffic, the lines. The thing about also suburban schools, they have a little bit more money to try it, so they can experiment a little more and see what works for them. And so that's why we identified them as the early majority, is just because they have a little bit more money to try it, and then they obviously have the problem. Will this innovation widen the socioeconomic gap? We said no, because it's more inclusive for students that have low socioeconomic status. So for those who don't know about the school lunch program, they give free and reduced lunch for kids that are under that threshold. I think that threshold is different for every state. So when you have kids leaving for campus and then kids that can't afford to leave campus to go eat lunch, it's more inclusive for them to have everybody stay on campus. So it kind of closes that gap. And then it also closes the dietary disadvantages for students with lower socioeconomic statuses. So in Japan, they started doing closed campus school lunches, and they saw that the students that were off campus were getting more fruits and vegetables than the kids in school. And so when they switched it to a closed campus lunch and provided more vegetable and fruit options, it closed that dietary gap. So definitely closes that socioeconomic advantage. How would I get the laggards to adopt? So we identified the laggards as large, poor schools. The reason why that's important is because they don't really have the money to try this. When you have so many more students in your cafeteria, that means more lunch ladies, and then also you're paying to monitor those students during that time. So definitely large, poor schools. I would get the laggards to adopt by schools reporting attendance after lunch. Some states base school funding off of attendance. I know California, Texas, and there's like a few others base it off of attendance. And if one person isn't there that day, they don't get the $49 per student. So it just kind of attaches it to funding. Other ways we can limit, we can also, I know it's kind of funding, but there are other ways to limit school funding, and then also incentivize it by giving more money to the school lunch programs and stuff like that. And then finally, we've seen some states that have passed laws and ordinances. So in New Hampshire, in Nashua, they had a couple girls that were off campus lunch. They died in a car accident. And so they actually passed an ordinance in that city. So every school in that city has to have closed campus lunch because of the ordinances laws in there. So those are just some of the ways that we get the laggards to adopt. Are windfall profits possible? So we said yes. Higher attendance means more funding. So depending on the state, like I said, more funding is attached to attendance. So when you have more attendance, that's a big deal. And then also you have better test scores. You have better test scores, you get more funding. So definitely some windfall profits possible. Incentives, we kind of divided them into two. So we're getting our students to adopt this innovation without any mandatory school rules. We would create more options for school lunches. We would have exam exemptions. So if you stay on campus for lunch, you get exempted for your final exams, stuff like that. You could do lunchtime raffles and prizes, and then free lunch, I guess, if you have the money, which I doubt many schools do. If we're getting the schools to do it, like I said earlier, report attendance after lunch, limit funding or expand it, and then pass laws and ordinances.
That's me.
Yeah.
So there wasn't really that many like undesirable consequences for staying on campus, but some things that can happen, like if you would go off campus for lunch, is it can put the lives of the students at risk while they travel, so higher risk of accidents and everything. Like we talked before, the tardiness or skipping after, like if you go out and get lunch and then you decide, okay, maybe I'll just go home, like you don't want to come back to school then, creates an opportunity for students to make poor, unsupervised choices. It costs more to eat off campus than it does to have a school lunch, and then it creates a safety for just the school campus in general. Just having kids entering and exiting school campus, having more traffic, and just causing a lot more problems. Is over-adoption possible? Probable. No, I don't believe that over-adoption is possible. And then like the teachers and even parents like the idea of knowing where the kids are. So I think that this thing here, it's going to just stay where there's going to be kids wanting, or parents even wanting their kids to stay on campus more for lunches. And then is there a pro-innovation bias? The pro-innovation bias is being seen with safety. Instead of building more entrances and exits for schools or even increasing the time given for lunch, most schools just choose to have a closed campus. Could paraprofessionals be used? A paraprofessional could be a nurse or even a health teacher at the school, I believe, because they can teach kids how the school lunches could be more nutritional for them. And then they can inform, like I said, nutritional value of eating on campus and how it's better for them. And then who you might target or tailor. You would target the upper level high schoolers who are able to drive and leave campus and try to give them incentives to stay on campus and not leave, because they're the ones that can drive, while most of the time, like if you have somebody that's only a freshman or a sophomore, they would have somebody bring something back for them instead of going off campus themselves.
So when looking at who the opinion leaders would be, the opinion leaders are really the parents. I know one of the reasons that I stayed on campus as a freshman is because my mom said I couldn't go to lunch with people because she didn't trust them driving me to lunch. So she's an opinion leader, and for me, also the teachers and other people in the community, like the parent-teacher organization, they promote healthier lunches and promote the kids going to those. So this was a real big thing when we were all younger in the cafeteria. There was these posters telling us to choose milk over the juice. Maybe an innovation champion could be a similar campaign like this, but encouraging the kids to eat lunch in the cafeteria. So what is Extension's role in this? Extension can do a good job of educating not only the kids but the cafeteria and the school as well, to make sure that the meals are well balanced and they follow the My Plate, which has replaced the My Food Pyramid that we learned about in elementary school. So how has this innovation been reinvented? So a lot of, like we talked about a lot, people were leaving campus, going out to lunch. And so a lot of high schools or schools looked at their cafeteria and they were like, how can we change what we're currently doing so kids will stay here for lunch instead of going off campus? In my high school, when they tried to revamp our cafeteria, they started offering more options. And so giving the kids the ability to choose what we wanted for lunch instead of just the one tray that we all got in elementary school that had applesauce, a sandwich, or whatever. So critical mass. Critical mass is the rate of adoption and when it becomes self-sustaining. So to get students to eat in the cafeteria, they can have the opinion leaders develop a menu that the students like, give them that option that you have multiple different lunch lines so people can go choose what they want to eat for lunch. And they still feel like they're getting to go off campus a little bit because really they like the freedom of getting to choose what they wanted for lunch. And so you're able to replicate this in the cafeteria, still give them some sort of freedom while keeping them on campus. And then also to achieve critical mass, you can also just have a closed campus lunch where you require students to stay in the cafeteria. And that's it. Thanks for coming to our TED Talk.
Thank you. Show our appreciation. Okay, again, questions aren't really about school lunch, but
adoption, I
Got you,
think
this.
is,
Well, we want to pick up your.
Oh, I didn't know if you wanted to listen to you.
but they don't just want to hear the question, they want to hear the answer. So you might, the question, you might kind of repeat at least a fragment of it, so that picks up, and whoever's answering can pick it up. We have all the questions?
I just spoke to Mitchell. Okay, the other one's better. I'll give you that one.
Katie wants to know if an undesirable consequence is the lost income from the fast food restaurants that depend on high school students coming and spending their money. Is that an undesirable consequence of this innovation?
It could be one, but I think they are able to go and be able to get more or get money from like other people that are coming, because I mean you still have people that are in the workforce that go out and get lunch, that don't bring their lunch. So during that time frame, like there's still a large amount. I feel like the schools are just a small portion of them, and that they depend on a lot of other people to come during their lunch hours.
How would you convince children who bring their lunch that they would be classified as possibly the laggard or late majority to utilize the school cafeteria?
A lot of the reason that kids bring their own lunch is because they don't like what the cafeteria serves. So by being able to give them more options, you're encouraging them to adopt.
Kind of like that website that we listed, they had the different options and you could do it by month. So by having that, it's not just you go to school and there's one thing for it.
Chelsea thinks she heard you say that the only way you're going to achieve critical mass is mandating and closing campus. What's the answer to, if you didn't close campus, could you get people to adopt this innovation without mandating closed campus?
Yeah, I said that was kind of a last resort if you weren't achieving critical mass, was closing campus.
What's the most promising mechanism for getting critical mass without mandating closing campus?
I really think that it's giving them more options. I know my friend group, we started staying on campus for lunch because they started to serve more variety of things in the cafeteria.
How do you and basically what incentives could you get teachers to get them to promote school lunches? Because what if they're free time during lunch? Like basically they have to go sit in the cafeteria and watch kids versus being able to sit in the teachers' lunch with other teachers. Does that make sense?
I mean, the way that usually works is just usually they have duty rotations. So
I
like,
think what you're saying is an undesirable consequence is the faculty now have to work during school lunch. Is that right?
oh, I mean,
Agreed.
yeah. So I guess to speak to that, I don't know. I guess
They usually have duty rotation.
Yeah.
They take turns doing it.
And I mean, just as a teacher, you know, it's something you're probably gonna have to do
Yeah.
either way. So
Technology allows food to be delivered, aka Grubhub and other organizations like that. And so closing campus, assuming it allow food to be delivered. Okay. And so it says the alpha pups, those that have the means will still get around eating in the school cafeteria. How would you win them over?
I mean, like we said, it's the option stuff, or just having the different options, but also, like, I think with a lot of it, it's like the closed campus, it's more the fact, like, getting kids not to leave. So in a way, I mean, there's nothing really against getting food delivered. It's just staying on campus.
That's the most important. You don't care that they eat in the cafeteria. You just don't want them to leave. Is that it?
Yeah.
I would say.
So it's not, the innovation is not getting kids to eat in the cafeteria. The innovation is to get kids to stay in school. Is that what you're saying? You need to change the title of your presentation.
No, it's both. I would say.
Will thinks that if you've been in the school cafeteria, a lot of food gets thrown away. It's going to contribute to undesirable consequences. There's going to be a lot more food waste. How often do people order a meal and then throw most of it away at a restaurant? Agreed?
Yeah, but like when I was in junior high and high school, we had kind of like a natural resources class. They would take it out back, compost it, and then they would use it back on like a garden to grow some vegetables that we'd keep there at the school.
Some schools are also packaging their lunches and sending them home to kids who don't have food at home.
I think in Indiana.
In Indiana?
Yeah.
Who could the schools use as opinion leaders for this innovation? They want some more information on that.
Are there actually some students who are opinion leaders?
Because our students can listen to their parents or to other students.
Stephen listens to his parent. But what about juniors and seniors? So who are the opinion leaders among the juniors and seniors?
Some of ours, I would say, are athletes.
Okay,
Like
let's say you know who they are, and there are 4 different ways you could figure out if you didn't know. If you said, I'm not sure, I could find out, right? Okay, so what do you do? How do you get them on board?
How do you get the opinion leaders on board?
Yes.
I don't know. I was just going to tell you who the opinion leaders were, I guess.
Well, you have 4 different ways you could find out. And you might think they're athletes, but they may not be. The athletes may be not the opinion leaders. But you have ways of figuring out who they are. Once you figure out who they are, what incentives are you going to give them to eat in the school cafeteria, and that they're going to bring everyone along with them?
Probably.
Like nutrition value, I guess. I'm not sure. Like
That'll do
that's
it.
what I'm saying is we ate in the cafeteria because of like we meet certain nutritional
You
values.
got to think beyond your own experience.
Yeah, but like the free lunches, that would
If
be
you give them
great,
free lunch,
but
70% of the kids already are on free lunch.
Yes.
is it? No.
60% statewide.
It's a lot. I read a
Title
paper
I
on
schools
this.
are
So kids are already given the free lunch,
Yeah.
and they're not eating the free lunch.
So
They're
then
going-
you also increase it by doing getting rid of those final exam exemptions. You have those
Or maybe
extra credits. You have those lunch prizes. Just get them in the cafeteria.
What about
Um,
schools that don't allow students to eat the main lunch served because they have an overdue balance in their account? How do you fix that problem? Or how is that?
I know like at my school we weren't allowed to leave anyway, so that was kind of our problem because people would call it getting stuck in the lunch cafeteria because if you didn't know you had an overdue balance, then you were there anyway.
But they're saying they're not able to eat. So if your innovation is to get kids to eat in the cafeteria, they can't eat because no one's paid their lunch bill.
You give them lunch passes. So, for example, you get 1 week of lunch passes to fix that overdue balance, and that gives you time to get that lunch balance up to.
But it's not their fault.
No, it's not their fault. It's also their parents' fault. But there's.
Okay.
But it gives them time to communicate that.
If the innovation is to get kids to eat in the cafeteria, how do you convince a student who's already packing their lunch and bringing their lunch?
I think we already answered that. We said by providing more options, it would encourage them to try to.
Why would you discourage them from bringing their lunch from home? Is there something bad about bringing food from home? Unless it's a Limburger cheese sandwich? Curry chicken?
And that's the other problem we said was the malnutrition. So when you're eating in school,
So you
there's
just bring a
the
big bag of
nutritional
Lay's
value.
potato chips?
Yeah.
And so how do you can't bring the lunch from home?
No, we just provide a better option of more healthy meals.
What if they brought 3 candy bars? How are you going to convince them that they should eat 3 candy bars instead of
through.
The school lunch is going to be healthier, but I want 3 candy bars.
Well, they even lunch, at least they're having something besides just the candy.
Yeah, but how do you convince them that 3 candy bars, this your school lunch is better than 3 candy bars?
The incentive.
We look at nutritional facts.
Yeah, no, the
Yeah, that'll convince the
the
16-year-old.
incentivizing. If you buy lunch on campus, you get exam exemptions, you get school prizes. It's using those incentives to get them to stop.
A lot of kids will face bullying in the cafeteria. How will you be able to get those individuals into the crowd in the cafeteria rather than getting in their car, avoiding the lunchroom crowd, or
There's
or just like hiding out somewhere in school?
when you have more school kids in the cafeteria, you're going to need a lot more monitoring. So we'll just get more teachers to be voluntold to work on that lunch duty to make it more of a safer place for the
Spider-Man.
Yeah.
Who are the change agents in this innovation? Who's working to promote this innovation?
I would identify a couple people. So first, I'd probably do the lunch ladies. I love my lunch ladies. They're awesome.
Would it be okay if they were a man?
What?
Would it be okay if it was a man?
Yeah, it's fine. It's fine if they're men. Lunch people, my lunch servers. So those are good change agents by having that positive interaction with them. Then also, like we said, those school nurses and.
One of the change agents that is really helping with the more nutritional meals in cafeterias is Michelle Obama. That was her big platform for everything, was doing all of that.
How do schools pay for the more expensive lunches with the budget problems schools are having?
Can you repeat the question? Sorry.
So how do schools pay for the more expensive lunches with the budget problems we are having? I guess you could
Define more expensive lunches.
Well, you said you're going to have all these options. They're not going to make just one meal. They're going to make a bunch of meals. You're going to have salad bars, all things that are going to cost more.
That's
So where's that
more
supposed to come?
equipment, and if you're in a poor rural school,
I mean, schools can do leftovers on Fridays. Whatever meals you do throughout the week, keep them and reheat them for Friday, and then you can have a all lunch bar, I guess. That's what our school did in high school. You can do a salad bar. I mean, salad's going to keep for a little while. That gives them multiple options.
You can increase the cost of lunch. You can make it.
but what about those students who don't have the money?
They're already on a free and reduced program, and then
But if
also
you
you can.
increase it,
But then
then
also you
that's-
can.
if you
You
increase
can
it-
create. You can also create almost like a progressive lunch program. So the cost of your lunch is based off your parents'
But if you
taxes.
increase the price of the lunch, then that means that they're not going to be able to completely do a free or reduced lunch. If you have to keep dropping
Yeah,
the
but then
price.
you also combine that with the incentives, the exam exemptions, and if you combine that with the exam exemptions and the prizes and those extra credit points and all those other incentives, then that cost is less of an issue.
Is the problem individual blame bias or system blame bias? Or take the bias off. Is it individual blame or system blame? Is the individual to blame or is the system to blame?
System.
I'm sorry?
System.
The system's to blame. Okay, so if the system's to blame, how are you going to fix it? How do you fix the system?
Providing more options is the first off.
How do you tie better test scores to kids staying on campus for lunch?
Because they're not.
Attendance and test scores are. Excuse me.
No, you're
Sorry.
You got it. That's what we talked about with the tardy issue. If kids aren't leaving, there's less likely of a chance of them not coming back to class at all. And also if they aren't nourished, then they're not going to do well on their tests. So it's going to increase the test scores.
What kind of prizes would you offer as incentives other than exemption from final exams, which seems counterproductive to academics, but anyway?
3 candy bars.
What about windfall profits? Or those? Did y'all go over that again?
Yeah, so what we talked about with windfall profits is that schools that had more students on with eating in the school cafeteria have higher attendance, and so higher attendance means more funding, and then also attendance and test scores are and mandated test scores are tied pretty closely, and so when you have higher test scores, you get more funding.
If we had to turn this around on college students, how could we convince college students to eat at the student union or in one of the residence hall cafeterias instead of going off campus to eat?
Making it faster.
Did you farm that answer out to Catherine Bessie?
faster.
There's just so many. I mean, you have to open more places on campus because if everybody goes to the student union, there's going to be 20, however thousand many kids trying to go in there for lunch. I mean, granted, it's going to be throughout the time, but you figure a 3-4 hour time frame for your lunch. Say 4 hours. That's 5,000 kids an hour to try to serve.
You can also make food cheaper on campus. It's more expensive.
Yeah, one of the differences is a college student, you say you've got a 3 or 4 hour lunch, right? People eat, Chick-fil-A starts lining up at 10:30 and goes all the way till 3:30. But in a public school, lunch is in this time frame, which, and again, some schools do the same thing. They school breakfast ends at 10 o'clock and school lunch starts at 11:15. And you wonder why the kids are hungry at 3 o'clock.
There's schools that start at home, they're serving lunch at 10:15, 10:30.
And just a commentary, why they do that is because they say we don't have enough cafeteria space. I mean, if the school didn't have enough bleacher space for the football team, they would build more bleachers, right? And so, but we're not going to build a bigger cafeteria in our seats. Okay, thank you very much. We'll come back to you when we get to the end. Thank you.